Yes, okay. Well, good morning, everybody. Nice to see so much people at the World Assembly. Today, it's the 16th of July, and we're one of the workshops. This is the workshop... okay. Can I have the presentation? Oh, okay. It's the workshop on climate change and the future of work. So if you want to follow that, then you're in the right room. Otherwise, you have to find another room, I think. And I think we've got an interesting program today. This session is, together with Martin Hogan from ICOH and me, myself, Andrea Hiddinga, we prepared this session together with a lot of speakers, 7 in total. And we're happy that finally we're now starting this session today. Martin, can I invite you to tell something about ICOH?
Yes. ICOH is the International Commission on Occupational Health. It was founded in 1906 in Italy, and it is really a global multidisciplinary group with the primary interest of protecting workers' health. It involves doctors, nurses, hygienists, psychologists, toxicologists, and you keep going. We're represented today by our President, Sung-Kyu Kang from South Korea, our Vice President, Jean Pingle from India, Diana Gagliardi, our Secretary General, who is from Italy, and I'm Martin Hogan, I'm from Ireland, so pretty international group, and we'd be delighted if you could look us up.
Then I can tell you something about IOHA. IOHA is the International Occupational Hygiene Association. It's an association for association, an umbrella organization, and I think I'm not sure how many countries now are related to this to IOHA, but we've got, I think, approximately 40 organizations attached to us. Today I see two past presidents actually in the room. It's Maharshi Menti and René Leblanc. So glad you're here. And our president is in some other sessions. So we are also there, but we're scattered around this morning a bit. The third person I would like to introduce is our rapporteur from today. It's Andrea Holloway. She's also, as an occupational hygienist, connected to IOHA through the Australian Association. So welcome that you are willing to be our rapporteur for the day. An important task. And so, climate change.
Climate change has serious impacts on the safety and health of billions of workers worldwide. Workers are often the first to be exposed to the effects of climate change for longer periods and at greater intensities. Excessive heat, solar UV radiation, air pollution, extreme weather events, vector-borne diseases, and agrochemicals are just some of the hazards exacerbated by climate change that workers face. According to the latest estimates, every year over 2.4 billion workers are exposed to excessive heat at work, and around 1.6 billion workers to solar UV radiation. Air pollution is also a concern for billions of workers, particularly those that work outside. Hundreds of thousands of workers are dying from hazardous exposures aggravated by climate change. Extreme weather events are increasing, exposing workers to wildfires, flooding, and major industrial accidents. The financial implications cannot be ignored due to lost productivity, business disruptions, and damaged infrastructure. The moment is now to ensure safe and healthy work in a changing climate.
So, climate change is something that's very real for all of us. It's becoming more and more in the news, whether it's a flood in Texas with tragic results, heat zones becoming ever further north or south, and for longer parts of the year, and temperature records being broken constantly. All of this, and we're trying to work in a safe manner. So today we're going to explore some aspects of climate change and the effects they could have on worker health. We're going to talk about heat stress, a very obvious result, but also I touched on the Texas floods, but the emergency workers and response workers who have to deal with the impacts of direct or indirect of climate change. It's going to be another session. And then we're going to have a session on environmental social governance, ESG, which will be very interesting and I think bring it all together. I was talking to some of my colleagues, even in Ireland where we came from, we had a high temperature weather warning last week. It was a yellow weather warning. They warned it could reach temperatures in excess of 27 degrees. So it's all relative, okay? But I suppose the point I'm making is that countries that never experienced this are experiencing it. In Europe, we see this record high temperatures year on year. And all around the world, this is going to have a huge impact. Today, we're going to try to discuss this, to look at ways we can go forward and deal with climate change to protect worker health.
So, this is the program of today. We started with the general introduction, Martin and myself. Then we've got the topic of heat stress. And we've got 3 speakers. We've got Jason Lee, Sergio Hori, and Vidya Verupal. Yes. Then we're going to, and it's approximately 50 minutes. We've got some introduction by the 3 speakers, and then we'll have an interactive discussion. The second topic is flooding and emergency response workers. We've got 2 speakers. We've got Yoko and we've got Bonnie. Oh, there's Bonnie. And the same 2 introductions and a discussion. Then we've got a 25-minute break, so you can energize a little bit. And then we're going to focus on ESG, more an umbrella a topic, I think, but very interesting. And that will be led by Candice and Jamie. After that, 40 minutes, we will have 15 minutes left, and we'll try to summarize this whole session, all the topics, and we'll do that together with Andrea and Martin and myself. So this is the program for today. And then I would like to introduce for the first session on heat stress, Dr. Jason Lee Kai. He's the first speaker and in this session, and he's director of the Heat Resilience and Performance Center and chair of the WHO WMO South Asia Heat Health Club. Yes, and Dr. Lee will give some insights on the physiology perspective on how the human body will respond to heat stress. So, Jason Lee, the floor is yours.
Konnichiwa and Ohio. Let's flash my slides first.
Oh, it's the other presentation.
Okay. Good morning once again. It's always a privilege to be back in a country I love a lot. You know, my wife and kids always ask me, if you were to go to one country, where would you go? I always say Japan, Japan, and Japan. You know. But what is even more special is often in meetings like this, I get to see important folks that I don't get to see back home. So I see my own leadership from the workplace safety and health council, from Ministry of Manpower. So I'm delighted to see my own leadership here. And of course, to see my old friends, COG, Vidya, Bernard at the back. You know. So this is a short presentation. I give an overview, and I hope we have time to exchange our experience and views a bit. But before I start, I just want to orientate us. You know, let's come back to why we are here for. And I know each of us has our own mandates in our responsibility. But if we talk about heat stress, every heat stress or every heat death is preventable. And therefore, if we are serious about these mandates, right, broad policies wouldn't cut it. Heat stress advisory is almost like buying a property. When you get a property, you say that it must be location, location, and location, right? And therefore, I ask that as we shape heat stress advisory, it must always be context, and context. And we just said that one example, 27 degrees Celsius in some places could be very hot. Talk to our friends from India, they will laugh at you and say 27, that's winter. So it's very contextualized, and it's not just about the weather and climate. As you see, there are other determinants that determine how hot a worker can become. Also, don't be shaped that when it's hot, the heat strain increases, and therefore when it's not so hot, workers do not get hot. That is a wrong understanding. And hopefully in this quick overview, I can strengthen those points. Immediately, I just talk about this, right? Very simple equation. We are all after a hot worker in this context. We call that heat strain. And the three key determinants of how a worker will get is how hot the weather, what attire, and more importantly, this is the most complex, right? The physiology of work and the individual. So it'd be futile and naive to think, let's give an example on the platform workers. We're going to derive a heat health advisory and tell the Uber workers, in some parts it will be the Grab or Panda, each has its own form, and say that you should slow down because if you work hard, you will get heat injured. Remember that conversation that we are programming is a risk conversation. If I'm the platform worker, I probably will politely look at you and say, I understand this heat health advisory, you have invested years to be as precise as you want. But it's still a risk conversation. I may get heat injured, but I will politely respond by 6 p.m. if I don't work equally hard in face of a very warm afternoon, my family will be compromised at 6 p.m. And therefore, I will ignore your very well-intended heat messages and work equally hard. Therefore, we need to be very creative, perhaps getting policymakers to put on regulations to protect the workers, speak to the platform chief executive and say, if you don't regulate within, then your reputation will be affected because there will be more accidents, work productivity will be affected. Speak to counterparts from other ministry. Say this is their work life, right? If you don't keep them well, we're going to pay the finances down the road because the Ministry of Health will suffer with all the health burdens down the road. We now know about kidney disease. I tell you, metabolic disease, cardiac disease are still being discovered. So as you ask, it's almost like, wow, there are so many things underneath my carpet. Sometimes I don't even dare to flip out that carpet. So there's a lot of implications. But here lies also the opportunity. Now you know, okay, in order for me to prevent the workers from getting too hot, it's not just about the weather, which pretty much not a lot we can do about, right? That's beyond our control. You can manipulate the attire and also the physiology. But very briefly, since I'm a thermal physiologist, I should briefly explain how does the body respond to heat, right? In the compensable states, when you are comfortable, no issue. You have very good physiological system to beat the heat. You push your blood to the sides, to the skins, and hopefully if the gradient is good, you lose it. You can also sweat, but the sweat must be evaporated. But when it becomes uncompensable, this is what occurs. As an increase in cardiovascular strain, at some point you press on, there will be a reduction in blood flow to your guts. For whatever reason you don't want to stop, then the toxins within your guts will begin to leak outside your gut into the portal circulation. This is where if you are sick, if your immune system is weak, you cannot fight it. And if you don't stop, for whatever reason you press on, your whole body now is in a red alert, trying to fight it with huge inflammatory responses. Eventually, one organ will fail. Usually, the kidneys will go first, cascade of events, multiple organ failure, and then you die. It's actually very difficult to die of heat stroke. When somebody died of heat stroke, you know we have failed. When someone died of heat stroke, it means many suffered. Also, don't look at it just from pure reputation, economy. Do it not because we have to, or do it because we want to. Pandemic is not too long ago. I hope you remember during those days, who were the ones that took care of us? Our healthcare workers, our platform workers who deliver all the food to your doorstep, our construction workers who give you all the shelter that we live in our comfort home. So let's remember then as we undertake this work. This is an example. This is what we call heat syncope, a very mild form of heat illness where you basically have blood shunts to your skin, you feel lightheaded, you drop on the floor. There's one soldier there that dropped. Shortly after, you see another one at the back row who fall. Yeah, this is not uncommon. Yeah, when you stand in the parade square, some of you have that experience before. You get lightheaded and you collapse. It's actually a protective mechanism. You have to push the blood back to your brain very quickly. You recover. But the same physiology can occur on the photo on your left. That is also heat syncope. In this case, this worker did not have the chance to maintain his life. Why? We don't know why the safety harness wasn't on. But today, my question is, have we attributed all these traditional sleep, trip, and fall in terms of worst case to heat? You probably didn't. This is one of the typical workplace accidents. But heat often can be the first trigger, resulted in other implications, and therefore we don't quite attribute. I say this because if you think that looking at my cases, 3 or 4 cases of heat stroke or heat exhaustion per year, from an evidence perspective, we shouldn't be investing so much because we have other issues like nose-induced deafness, so on and so forth. Have we asked ourselves, because of thermal discomforts, we might incur issues of other sorts that we have not quite attributed? The first trigger could be heat. We don't know yet, but it's important for us to quantify. How about ear defenders, ear mufflers? There are solutions there, but have you tried putting a ear defenders in a hot and humid environment? What is the human behavior response there? You might loosen it, you might even remove it. So look at that and quantify the real implications. This is Project Heat Safe. We completed it, and now we're in discussion of Project Heat Safe 2.0 in Cambodia, Vietnam, Singapore, and the photo in the center, South Korea, platform worker. We measured their cardiovascular and thermal strain. The rest of the photos are hovering about 30 degrees plus minus, a typical Southeast Asia environment with high humidity. The photo in the center was 20 degrees Celsius. In the Southeast Asian perspective, that is super comfortable. But which group has the highest cardiovascular and heat strain? The photo in the center. Why? Because that's the only job profile they are being paid by piece. And therefore, they work as hard as possible. And you know the equation now? I can become very hot because I work exceptionally hard. Thanks, Andrew. And last 2 slides, I don't have time to elaborate the findings, but I'm always very proud of my own ministry. It's called Back Home Ministry of Manpower, because always remind us the MOM means what? Mom, right? And I think Jimmy has heard it so many times, but I will say it again. No one loves you more than your mom. So MOM always reminds me and my team that amongst all reasons why we do things, we must do it out of empathy. Because without them, we are in no position to do what we want to do. And finally, I want to end with giving you solutions. There are solutions already out there. If you have no heat management strategy, you will hit your limit. Work productivity will be compromised. Health and safety would be compromised. So the good heat management solution must reduce, attenuate, or extend your own limit. Because by doing so, look at the y-axis, your thermal capacity is now expanded. This expansion has a direct positive implication of ability to work well and safe in a hot environment. And the solutions are all there. So with that, I hope that's a quick introduction. I hope we have more time to interact, and questions you may have, please raise them out accordingly. Thank you.
Thank you, Jason, for this insightful start of the day with some aspects on the human body and how we respond to heat stress. I can invite now the second speaker, which is Professor Seiki Hori from the University of Occupational and Environmental Health in Japan. Dr. Seiji Hori will explore the escalating health effects of climate change with a focus on Japanese aging workforce and the rising incidence of heat-related illnesses. So I will give the floor to you.
Thank you very much, Andrea. Good morning, everybody, and nice coming to Japan. Today, what I'm have a content here is, well, the health effects of climate change. And, well, especially in Japan, we are having a very much rapidly aging workforce, which will another risk for having a heat stress. And when we let you know how many number of heat-related illnesses happening now in Japan, and then what we are doing for mitigation of those. Well, health effects of climate change. In summary, I put 5 things over here, heat-related illness, but that's not only the thing. We are also having a risk of vector-borne infections and also the water-borne infections in Japan, which we have never experienced in history coming from the south. And as Jason said, we are having a respiratory and a cardiovascular diseases aggregated by the heat stress. And also nowadays, there are lots of papers having that the mental disorder may be worsened by the heat stress. Well, I think the audience over here, everybody knows why the heat stress is now worsening in the globe. It's after the industrial revolution, when we started to burn the fossil fuel, and also deforestation and agricultural activity also worsens the heat stress in the globe. And it is interesting, the Northern Hemisphere having having an effect more than the Southern Hemisphere of the globe. And also we know that IPCC have 4 different models for the future 100 years of history of the globe that's saying that LCP 2.6 scenario is the best scenario, which will follow the agreement in Paris, COP15, saying that only less than 2.0 degree of increase of the global temperature after the industrial revolution. But I'm not sure we are following this RCP 2.6 scenario right now or not, because if that is right, from 2040, the carbon dioxide equivalent should decrease after that. But we haven't seen that. Well, the climatic extremes will affect us through the heat waves, but that's not only the thing. Severe storms, flooding, droughts, wildfires, ocean acidification is also the thing, because the carbon is in the air that will dilute it into the ocean. Then the ice melt from the glaciers, also the Atlantic Ocean, and the rising sea levels. Well, it's a big issue for the Pacific small islands. Well, what's happening in Japan? Well, we have a very good statistics for the average temperature in the summertime, which is from June, July, August. All the average is minus 1.5 degree compared to the 30-year average from 1991 to 2020. We often use this 30-year average as the standard. So it started from minus 1.5, and now it's plus 1.76, which was the historical highest last year we experienced in this country. And 2023 is also the same, plus 1.76. So altogether, it's like a 3.0 increase of the temperature in Japan. And we also having very hot days, which is defined as 35 centigrade or over. The accumulated number of the days like that is the highest in 2024, which is last year. Another big thing for this country is we are the most aged country in the world. 29% of the population is over 65 or more. And those people still have to work in the workplace, because otherwise we don't have a good workforce. Number of workforce is shrinking right now in Japan. Now, all the elderly people are welcome to the working market. That means that these people still have to work in hot environment and also physically demanding work. Now, as a result, we also have good statistics for the census data. The vital statistics of Japan says that number of the Japanese who is dying from heat stroke is, had the highest in 2010. Oh, no, this is 2010 heat wave. I had a mistake over here, but that was the hottest year in history. And more than 1,000 people, close to 2,000 people died from heat-related illness in this country. And last year, I think we were also having more than 1,000. And we also know that the age category, this is a mortality rate. And we also we can calculate the mortality rate of over 100 years of age in this country because there are lots of people, elderly people there. And we know that the mortality is highest in the elderly people like this. For the occupation setting, we having work-related heat strokes happening more than before. So what we are doing is we put very much strong emphasis of promoting the measurement of WBGT. I think many people over here know what is WBGT, but this is said by this equation over here. And Japan Sport Association showed us the very clear guideline which says that if you are experiencing 28 degrees of WBGT, maybe you have to think about stopping the sports event. The Japan Sports Association is an association to promote the sports games, but they even says that you have to stop the sports game because it is too hot for the sports at a degree of 28. We also have a emergency transport ambulance coming up the rate of the emergency transport by heat stroke from WBGT to 28. From here, you will see a number of ambulances are called. And which is also interesting is that in the earlier summer, you are having a more number of the ambulance call than compared to the late summer, even at the same WBGT value over here. So what we are doing is we implement the legislation for heat stroke prevention, and also we educate the people and let them aware of the heat stress, and then some technological innovation is also there. So we limit the working hour over here like this, and also we ask the employers to install the ventilation cooling facilities. And from the Ministry of Environment, they said the Climate Change Adaptation Act in 2018, and now they're giving us an alert for through the media saying that if we're expecting WBGT of 33 or more at any site in the prefecture, they will alert us. And then we also prepared another special alert, which is 35. And this year also we had amendment in the regulation. Well, this is the website we are showing to the people, citizens, saying that each Japanese meteorological stations give us the estimate of WBGT like this, and we have a forecast for 2 days. And this is the area that we're having the alert of WBGT over 33. These are some of these pamphlets are issued by the different language, including also, of course, in English, but heat stroke alert, special alert. Japan is hot and humid, like this. And these are some technological innovations we are now seeing in the market. Well, some of them are cutting the radiational heat from the roof or from the window, and we are blowing the vapor from the ceiling. And these are the phase change materials. I think many of you have already seen those, but some phase change materials are melting the solid phase at the degree of 24, but some at 28. And we also have a cold water circulating garments like this. We also have cooling vest with adiabatic expansion of the compressed air. And also we use the I haven't seen this before, but the Peltier elements are also installed in the garment like this. We blow the air inside in the surface of the body like this fan-equipped garments. And also you may see lots of electric fan handy type or neck-worn type of the fans are in the market also. Some of them are in a belt, in a waist belt. And we also have different kinds of helmets monitoring the skin temperature, heart rate, and the GPS and cameras, and give us an alert. We also have ice slurries and refrigerate, which will transform the water into the ice slurries. So these are the things that we are seeing in Japan right now, and in the future, probably we're seeing a hotter summer in this country. But we hope to have we would like to see the number of the heat strokes will decrease, and we also have a national plan to do that and set a goal in 2027 to reduce the number of the heat stroke. Okay, that's my talk. Thank you very much for listening.
Thank you, Seiji, for this interesting talk on the situation in Japan and all the options we have for... you can sit. No, we'll do the questions afterwards, yes. Okay. Our third speaker is Vidya Venugopal. She's professor at the Faculty of the Public Health as SRIHER in India. She's also, and that's why I know her, she's part of the La Isla network. And Vidya will address the pressing issue of extreme heat exposure in India, where I think millions of people and workers in the informal sector face life-threatening temperatures. So, Vidya.
Thanks, organizers, for the opportunity. It's a pleasure for me to be here. And after the excellent deliberations by Jason and Seichi, I would like to bring in a different angle for this whole thing. We have a lot of informal workers in India, and what's being done for them is something that we would like to speak, and I would like to compare with what the high-income countries do. We are a low and middle income country. I would like to see what is it we can learn from the high income countries, and what can be done about what can the high income countries learn from what we do. So this would be a little bit different from the talks that Seichi and Jason gave. Right? Why is it important for India? Our average wet bulb globe temperatures range between 38 to 46, Martin, 27. And we have humidities between 40 to 80. Sometimes in Chennai, in Gujarat, in places where there are coastal zones, we have 60 to 80. And we know after 60 relative humidity, how your body gets more and more hotter. And the prevalence of self-reported HRIs is about 91% from our studies. We have spoken to about 6,000 workers across India, more so in the southern zone. We found 91% of them reporting heat-related illnesses. Just in 2024, India experienced record baking temperatures with 37 cities surpassing 45 degrees. So India is a hot country, and we have about 670 million workers who depend on heat-exposed labor. So for us, it's very important. By 2030, India will be losing about 34 million jobs due to heat. It's not job loss, but the number of hours that are being lost because people will not be able to continue working in the heat. Heat vulnerability for informal workers. I'm going to just focus only on the informal workers. We have about 60 to 70% workers who represent, it's a significant proportion of workers in the low and middle income countries, just not India. Lacks from contracts, there are no contracts. Social security is very poor for these people. Healthcare access is difficult, and there are less occupational safety measures. It's not mandated for these people. So they are out there in the open working, strengthening the country's economy, but they are not protected. So what are the direct and indirect impacts on for informal workers? You all know that. Informal workers often continue working despite symptoms due to economic necessity. They have to continue working, increasing the risk of severe illness to death. And they have chronic health effects. They have kidney damages, long-term issues. They have like cardiovascular issues, all the metabolic and cognitive function, all the problems that Jason spoke about, these people have it. Apart from that, they also have economic and social impacts, productivity losses, out-of-pocket expenses if they get sick because of heat, any medical expenses, lost wages because they are not able to continue working. And then social isolation, poor lifestyle because they all live in shacks and other things, and health system burden and regional economic loss as well. How are we prepared as a country to face this? We do have early warning alerts, heat health action plan of India. We do have early warning alerts, workplace protection legislation, some public education outreach, and health system readiness. Because all these workers are going to all these primary health centers or like free medical centers. So how are we prepared for that? We have some legislative actions. Heat-related health risks in workplaces, especially in outdoor manual risk, must be minimized through policy and enforcement. What we now have is national heat standards, mandatory rest work cycles, mostly for formal sectors, not so much so for informal sectors. Provision of shade and hydration, again mandated mostly for formal sectors registered under the Ministry of Labor, not so much for informal sectors. Monitoring and reporting, it happens both, but again, if you're a registered company, they are mandated to report, otherwise they are not. Incentive for compliance, again, the tax benefits and certification programs as heat-safe employees. For example, large construction company, which has about 500 contractors across India, they are mandated to, they get some incentives, but not small subsistence farmers, owners of small construction brick kilns, they don't do that. So lots of education is being done, just not as a part of heat action plan, but the state heat action plan, climate mission, all of they do that. They have a lot of visual charts, color-coded symptom guides, that kind of not only for the workers, but also for the public. And SMS and voice alerts, we do get some of those to tell that, today is a hot day, try not working outside. Community radio posters, drink, rest, water, shade, report, all of this is being done. But there are lots of challenges in implementation of these. This is expected to be done. Some of it is done. Fragmented governance and poor coordination between health, labor, and meteorological agencies. So do the heat action plan when we are getting more workers who are getting sick and coming to the hospitals, or the health system is even prepared to take them in. So there is less coordination between these three departments. Resource constraints like inconsistent power supply and limited cold chain capacity, just not in the hospitals, but even at workplaces. Data gaps worsened by misclassification and unreported heat-related illness cases. So it's all about the supply and demand, how the country is going to respond, how the government is going to take it very seriously is based on the supply and demand. And if we are not documenting it properly, the importance, the statistics is not there for the government to start taking action faster and faster, like the documentation system in Japan. So that's something that we can learn too. Financial pressures are forcing workers to ignore symptoms and continue work, with Jason Singh on piece rate. And how is this health system ready? We do definitely have standard operating procedures for recognizing and managing heat exhaustion, heat stroke, and dehydration. The hospitals do have it. Training programs, regular workshops for healthcare workers on triage and emergency care during heat waves. It's all being done. How often is a refresher being done? When they all join the workforce, health system workforce, they are being trained, but is it being refreshed is another question. Designated teams for rapid deployment in high-risk areas, and essential supplies such as cooling devices, ice packs, fans, oral rehydration, all of these are all existent. And backup utilities, generators, water supply for uninterrupted operation during the power outages. Most of these have in places where, mostly in urban, not so much so in rural areas. Rural areas are the areas where you have these agriculture workers, the brickkiln workers, and the salt pan workers coming to these centers. So why is it so difficult for us to manage it? Like just a comparison about how the global South, the LMICs approach heat compared to how the high-income countries do it. When it comes to education and training in the LMICs, usually we have the NGO-led or pictorial materials or low illiteracy models. But formal OSH curricula, e-learning materials for the high-income countries, which is much stronger, and then the trainers and all of that would really work well. Preparedness, community health workers, ASHA workers conducting door-to-door IECs. That's how the whole community works in low and middle-income country. When it comes to the high-income countries, corporate risk management units with real-time monitoring, which brings in the good data. Legislation and enforcements, we are emerging, Indian Factories Act, but not so much so for informal workers. Very strong, just take the Australian model work of health and safety. When it comes to the informal sector, limited enforcement on any of these heat action plans, formal sectors with enforceable occupational health and safety law. Health systems, basic integration happens in our setting. Community level response when it comes to high income countries, integrated occupational health and emergency care. So it's much, much stronger there. Innovations, we do a lot of community engagement. That's how the whole system works. Mobile technology, low-cost cooling. We are now very much mobile technology in India. Even a flower vendor has a smartphone that she does the GPay and everything. So we are getting there. Real-time monitoring happens. We also in Australia and other places they have sector-specific protocols. So that makes it much more better for tackling this. So just one last quick thing, the heat action plans, just comparing what we do in India and what we do, what was something very successful in Ahmedabad, the heat action plan, the first one to be rolled out in the country. And I'll compare it with the high income country, which was Australia's National Crisis Framework. What we did, after implementation of the heat action plan, 25% of reduction in heat mortality happened in Ahmedabad, which was a great success. And Ahmedabad is a very, very hot country, state. And local heat thresholds, the plan used meteorological data to establish local temperature thresholds. Once these thresholds are crossed, alerts were issued to communities and workplaces. Workplace alerts, these alerts prompt employers to activate specific measures, adjusting working hours, increasing breaks, providing hydration, and initiating emergency protocol. It happened. And community integration, alerts and interventions extend beyond workplaces to protect vulnerable populations, creating a holistic heat response system. So very, very strong and well done model. What they did in Australia, they had meteorological heat alerts directly with the sector-specific workplace directives, particularly in high-risk industries such as mining, construction, and agriculture. They knew who were going to be affected the most. Automated triggering, heat alerts automatically trigger mandatory workplace actions, reduce work intensity, enforce rest breaks, on-site health monitoring. The difference you can see, it's enforced in Australia, not in India. And sector-specific guidelines, customized heat management protocols, ensure that the unique challenges of each sector are addressed efficiently. Regulatory enforcement, compliance with heat safety regulations is enforced to prevent heat-related illness, injuries and fatalities. So you could see there is a difference. We are starting, they are enforcing it very strongly. So we can learn from each other. There is a lot of cross-learning we can do. Dual approach can be applied, education plus enforcement. In a low and middle income country, community engagement, working with the NGOs, NGOs working with the governments is what is going to actually really work. So combine both. Education without enforcement is going to be low compliance. Enforcement without education is going to be resentment. So combining both for effective behavioral change is what will work in a low LMIC setup. Policy integration, integrate heat into the existing health and labor policies, so it prevents silos and improves coordination and resource use in our settings. Resource mobilization, there is always a resource constraint when it comes to managing these things. And use of climate adaptation funds for heat infrastructure, cooling zone, cold chain logistics to align heat risk management with the climate resilience strategies would work. Continuous monitoring and community feedback loops. Establish reporting channels for concerns and success to ensure responsiveness and transparency, which is started happening now in India. Not so much so. Yesterday I was out there and there were stores that had mists coming for people to cool themselves. So even little things would make a huge difference. Thank you very, very much for your time.
Thank you. Could I ask the speakers to maybe take a seat while they're doing that? I thought that was a marvelous session. I think Jason started with telling us about the physiology of the human being and how we don't respond very well to heat, particularly when it goes over a certain level and our systems start breaking down. He did also mention that the work we're doing, the activity is a main factor as well as the actual heat, so that the piece rate is a driver, and some people have a conflict between following guidance on heat and maybe feeding their family. And then says she gave us a Japanese or a high-income country perspective of very great statistics, and you could see this quite scary lines of the increase in heat from the industrial age up till now and into the future. He also showed us, I suppose it's typical in Japan, lots of technological solutions that they may have in relation to aiding in cooling and the use of the WVGT. And then we had Vidya, who looked at it from a low and middle income country perspective with lots of informal working, and so where you can all have all the regulations in the world, but they're not necessarily enforceable particularly in informal sessions. But I also learned from her that there are things that can be done. There are things such as education, and this health heat action plan jumped out at me. 25% reduction in deaths due to heat, with simple, reproducible methods. So this is something I think we can all learn. So I think it's a great start. I'm going to open this session to the floor. So if anyone has any questions, I would be delighted if you could. Okay, there's a mic here. We might need to.
Thank you for sharing. I learned a lot, and I'm glad I'm here today. And while we have different jurisdictions, countries, right, what binds us together is the science, the evidence, and the need to uphold, especially the vulnerable workers. So we are here today. I have some questions about India and Japan's alerts. So India does it by SMS, and Japan does it, I'm not sure. So I would like to find out what is the mode and who does it. And this brings me to my next point. Prof. Jason talked about the context is important. So how do we alert while making sure that the context is really high heat stress and people take the right measures? Otherwise, if it's a false alert, in a sense, people might not take heed, and therefore the risk increases. Yeah, so I just wanted to hear your views about this, because this will impact economic activity. So once the pressure is on, like if I have to do more trips as a delivery worker, I will do it despite the warning. So how do we make people heed that warning and that alert when it comes up? How do we make them sit up? Yeah, thanks a lot.
Like I said, India is becoming pretty digital right now. We used to do by SMS previously, and those messages were long, coming from the Indian Meteorological Department, and most of it was just off the head for many of these people. So what we are trying to now do is we are trying to work with the government, trying to send a small digital picture saying, heat is going to be high, like, you're going to get a wave, and then, the temperatures are like 53 degree. So not the WBGT, but the temperature degree. And then we put the picture of the sun, worker getting sick, all of these pictures, and we are trying to send it to workplaces, and we have separate messages going to the hospitals so that they will be prepared. So be prepared, you might get more people in. So all that kind of messages. So something that would catch people's eye, and something that even an illiterate person can actually see in this picture that is being sent, and also have it in the tele system, coming in the televisions during the high soap serials like TV, where people usually see these soaps and everything during the evenings, and that's when they say, next 5 days is going to be really bad. Save yourself, don't go out in the sun. Things like that are very pictorial, and then still they catch the eye. That's how the IEC materials were sent during our COVID times. And India did so well when it came to conquering COVID and still making things work. So that is the model I think might work for a country like us. And when it comes to the context of context, I will give it.
Well, maybe I will say in this way that, the central ministry of handling all these kind of things are the Ministry of Environment in Japan. But the problem is that the Ministry of Environment doesn't have a real power over the society. They're sending the messages, so then the importance comes to how we will reach out to the people through the media. If you can see our variety of different generations from baby, children, students, universities, then to the elderly people, 65, 75. Now the people are some older people are inside the nurseries. Well, then we know that the older people will read the paper, will see the television, young people will see the SNS, and the working people, we put more emphasis on the enforcement of the legislation because, at least in Japan, it's easy to find out who is the employer of the victim. Then he will be strongly accused if he's failed to do something written already in the legislation. And all those kind of things are easily put into the court. So they will broadcast it again. And also, the big name of the companies in Japan, they don't want to damage their own name of the company. So they'll don't want to take a responsibility. They'll prevent the things. So working in generation in that way, the legislation, and we're very serious about the information of that.
Thanks. If I may add, I didn't quite complete the example I gave earlier because since you asked about platform workers, right? We always talk about multi-sectoral collaboration. So I'm going to play out a potential approach how we could hack this. How would that platform worker take this prospective advisory I could push out? And also first, I think from a government, I briefly mentioned about that, regulations must be in place, insufficient. We need the company's chief executive to be aware if he doesn't contribute to that regulatory process, then there's only how far the enforcement could go. But then I didn't talk about parametric insurance. I'm not sure how many are aware of this enabler. I think in India, that's played out quite well. Imagine if I'm a platform worker, my rate of delivery is 6 orders per hour. That is what I do in a normal day. But now the advisory said I should slow down because if I work at that rate, I will attain a high heat strain and therefore there will be health consequences, accidents may happen. But it's to the insurance companies' interest, because you have accidents, you're going to make claim, right? So I will pay out, let's say $5, depending on the currency you use, to cover your 6th order, and say you do just 5 because I will pay for the 6. I also engage the clients like us. I ask that when you receive an order during very raining day, hot days, right, you receive with a smile, even there's a premium being slapped on it because someone is taking the risk on your behalf. Therefore, we do have a part to play also, not just the governments, the companies. I'm quite happy. In fact, besides the tip, right, we might say, I have another option, very hot. I want to give a couple more dollars because someone is taking the risk on my behalf. Because by doing so, everybody chips in, right? Then the premium is being shared. You enjoy the food to be delivered during very rainy, very hot days, yet there is no consequence to that platform worker. Yeah, every of this must come into effect, this system. If you think even the government comes in, the employer comes in, right? I tell you, when you are that platform worker, you want to earn as much as possible. You are very creative to beat the system. And that's what you don't want it to happen. Remember, actions and intentions, while are the very first step, do not always translate into actions. Awareness and intentions are important, but don't stop there. Sometimes knowing, right, doesn't mean you will actually do it. Remember our infamous health campaign that asked you to do medical screening? How many only go to see a doctor when he or she is sick? Okay. So likewise, if I have not had accident yet, right, these are very good policy advisory, right? I will still take it at a very surface level. Remember that tobacco campaign also say you better stop smoking now because 30 years down the road, you could pay the price. Doesn't go very far also because humans are like that. If you don't reward or punish me immediately, sometimes I don't see a need to take action. So be creative, activating other sectors within the society and don't put the burden on yourself because there's only how much you can do.
Okay, thank you. Thank you. This was always going to happen in a session like this. We've used up nearly all of our time on one question, but can we take one more question? Can we make it brief and can we have the answers brief as well, please, if you don't mind?
I, René Leblanc from Canada, Montreal. We go from minus 25 in winter to plus 35 in summer, so a huge heat temperature difference. I was really impressed in Japan. I arrived 2 weeks ago. I saw all this construction worker wearing the vest, the ventilation vest, as well as the public worker, the policemen, and many people outside, people at the expo wearing these vests. I've bought one because I want to bring it to Canada, but I'm wondering to which point what's the effectiveness of that all the studies that were published on how it reduced effectively. I saw personally the impact on that, but if we are in India at plus 45 degrees, will this still have a efficient, will it still be efficient? And at which point studies show that the internal, for me, the heat management comes also, and that goes to you, the physicians. What is the temperature? We saw some watch in your presentation. Do they monitor internal temperature? Because to me, managing heat is all about also internal temperature. If you raise about 40 degrees, you're in critical condition. So that's basically the question, or how these vests are efficient and how can we measure and monitor the internal temperature to ensure that our workers are well protected.
We've about 1.5 minutes to answer. Okay.
Well, just in short, I would say that to up to the certain centigrade, a little bit above your body temperature, the fan type of things are still effective. But you have to be very wet on the surface of the skin. You are usually sweating in that kind of situation. If you blow on the sweat, then the vapor will vaporize, and that will reduce the body temperature. In that way, it is okay. But up in 45, 50, I don't think it is effective anymore, until 40 or something. Then the second question, the monitoring through the watch type of thing, I don't believe that is very effective at this moment, because that is not measuring the internal body temperature. It's only the heart rate. And if you see, there's an algorithm analyze the heart rate variability and things, and then we will estimate how far the temperature will go up. But it's not so evidence-based material right now.
30 seconds.
Yeah, I just want to add, just a rule of thumb, when it's above 40 degrees Celsius, convective ion wind is not so effective. Yeah, because usually 35, you might say, no, above 35 is already not effective. Not true, because above 35, you often sweat, and there's still some evaporative potential. But up to 40 degrees, there's a rule of thumb that wind might not be so good. Those products you see out there, right, often doesn't work very well in a humid context, because we talk about evaporative heat loss. If the environment is quite saturated, there is no gradient for you to evaporate. Remember, sweat does not lose heat, but sweat evaporation does. If I may to finish the point, coming from where you are, you have another risk factor. That is a drastic seasonal change. And while behavioral thermoregulation is the most effective, that is often a very high risk factor. People work at that metabolic rate. Suddenly summer comes, they did not change their behavior. That is a high risk factor.
Thank you. Okay, thank you. And thank you to the speakers for a wonderful, interesting session. And thank you very much.
Well, we will continue with a second topic, and it's not a, well, we're going from sweaty hot to wet, but as a result of flooding and extreme weather events. The first presentation of this topic, extreme weather events, will be by Yoko Tsuguri. She works for the Kikuchi Public Health Center in Kumamoto, Japan, and she will start her presentation with the health challenges that public employees are facing during disaster response. Yoko.
Okay, thank you for giving me this very valuable opportunity today. I'm going to talk about the occupational health activities for public employees. Let me introduce about myself first. Now I'm working for ASO, a public health center. Kikuchi is my former working place. So I'm working for ASO Public Health Center. That means I am one of the public employees. And also I'm appointed as an occupational health physician of my office, ASO Area Development Bureau. Today, I'd like to share my experience about occupational health activities in disaster occasions for public employees. This shows the global data of climate change and disasters. As you know, disasters caused by climate change have increased in these 20 years, especially flood and storms occur frequently. The situation is same in Japan. When frequency of heavy rainfall events that cause floods has been increasing in recent 10 years. In recent 10 years, flood or typhoon disasters, these occurs almost every year. The number of annual brief heavy rainfall events increased by about 1.4 times during the most recent 10-year period. This is the outline of the disaster management system in Japan. Japan's administrative system has 4 layers. 4 layers. From the national level to resident level. Once disaster occurred, disaster management councils are set up at each administrative level to respond to the disaster, and then public employees must work on the front lines. I think we can say public employees in Japan are emergency response workers. When disasters frequently occur, like recent situation, public employees in Japan have no time to rest. Let me share my experience. As one of the local government employees, and at the same time as an occupational health physician of local government employees, I worked to manage the disaster when the Kuma River overflowed in 2020. In Japan, in addition to their regular duties, public employees play an important role in disaster responses. And then they are easily becomes overworked. As an example, I'm showing the role of public health centers staff in Kuma River flood disaster. We, public health center staff, went to evacuation shelters to assess the environment of shelters and to assess health status of the affected people, and then try to improve the situation, collaborating with local stakeholders and assistant teams from outside of the region. At that time, we had to work whole day long until midnight every day, and we did not have time to go back to our own home for a few days. Moreover, we did not have enough food for ourselves. These are considerable characteristics of public employees in disaster from the view of occupational health. They must work on the front lines even while they are also one of the victims of the disaster. And they always must have residents first. They always must behave residents first. However, residents often direct their uncontrollable anger at public employees. This situation is very tough for public employees, even though, in general, occupational health systems of local government or municipality are very vulnerable compared to private companies. Then what I did for my own health center staff were like this. I ensured good working environment for my staff first. I cooked rice every morning for our staff and prepared the cardboard bed like this. They called my room hotel director or restaurant director, or sometimes even bar director. These are the flyers for mental health support and self-care workshop. With the consent of the managers of our office, flyers about mental health support were posted in the restrooms of the workplace immediately after the disaster occurred. In addition to that, with the cooperation of occupational health nurse, a self-care workshop was also organized. A month and a half after the disaster, a health survey of the staff was conducted. These are the results of the survey. Many staff members complained of sleep disturbances, dullness, and other symptoms, so on. I recommended them to go for counseling by occupational health staff. Here is one more activity. A workshop was held with municipal general and welfare officials and municipal occupational health physicians to reach a consensus on the importance of employees' health in disaster responses. Then, 3 years later, these occupational health activities we did at the time of the Kuma River flooding were developed at the time of the Noto earthquake disasters. The health status survey for public employees was digitalized using QR code like this, and occupational health staff provided counseling over the phone to those who had health concerns. I hope this kind of activity will be standardized at disaster occasions in Japan in the near future. Finally, I'd like to give you these questions for discussion. Thank you very much for your attention.
Thank you, Yoko, for this presentation. Now we're shifting from the individual and organizational impact to a more broadened system view. Our next speaker will show us how cities and institutions can prepare, adapt to these increasingly extreme weather events. So please welcome me to welcome Bonnie Yao, Executive Director of the Occupational Safety and Health Council in Hong Kong. Welcome.
Good morning, everyone. We are thankful to be invited here to share what Hong Kong and actually what Greater Bay Area has been doing to cope with the climate change and extreme weather, especially when it comes to flooding and landslide. Hong Kong actually is susceptible to typhoons, and the meteorological authority told us that actually the number of typhoons hasn't changed. The number of typhoons hasn't changed in recent years. We are still facing 5 to 6 typhoons every year, but the extreme weather we are facing more extreme weather patterns, and the typhoon becomes stronger, longer lasting, and more unpredictable. And you can see, what's happening when we have a strong typhoon in Hong Kong. With typhoons, we have heavy rains, we have thunderstorm, and this would lead to severe floods and landslide. Over the past 1.5 centuries, we can see that there are more rainfall. But more importantly and more alarmingly is that the number of heavy rains are increasing more proportionally. That is to say that because when the drainage system, you got a downpour and the drainage system cannot take care of the water, then severe flooding would happen. And in fact, around a year and a half before, Hong Kong has met with a once in a 500 years rainstorm. Everywhere you can see flooding, and within 24 hours, we have 600 millimeters of rainfall. This is inside an underground subway system. You could see that it's water everywhere. But what's more alarming is that actually the trains were still operating during that hours. And so the trains actually is like a boat or a submarine. And because of the situation, what the metro system asked the station staff to go down and to try to get the debris away such that they can declog the clotted drainage system. The staff didn't know where to go without any preparedness, no PPE, no training, no SOP whatsoever. And of course, we got a public uproar. Luckily, we didn't have any casualties because of this incident, but we think it's important. And we have to think about how to deal with the situation. Now, because of the necessity, the Hong Kong Metro has done a lot to solve the problem. First of all, they install flooding sensors at the stations with which are highly susceptible to flooding, such that they can get an early signal. When there is a signal, the staff will go to install floodboard. I noticed that there are many floodboards in the Japan the metro system. You see the boards everywhere to block the water first. But more importantly, now they have a contingency plan, such as the staff now know the preparedness. They get trained, such that when there is a severe flooding, actually they should stop the system from running. The train shouldn't still be operating when there is such a severe flooding in the underground system. And first they would pump out the water and then conduct risk assessment. And after that, with the proper training, proper PPE, the staff will only be allowed to go to the tunnel during that time. And so they have proper PPEs, they have innovative system, all that. But what's more importantly is that I would like you to take a look at the number 7. Now they are not only they are just to plug the loophole, but they are more forward-looking. They are trying to do 3-year a triennial climate change impact study for their own system, such that they would be forward-looking. They would get themselves prepared for what would have happened for when we have extreme weather. And what the MTR, the metro system in Hong Kong, were telling us is that they are considering automation, such that less rescue staff would be involved, like they would have motorized gates, inflatable dams. During flooding or during extreme weather, what needs to be still in operation is not only about the subway, but also the power companies. They are very important. So when we talk to them, actually, it's similar. Get water. First of all, they reduce the possibility of having their system being flooded, and then they would have water pumps in case they need that, as well as. What's more important is that they have regular drills and they have a preparedness, a contingency plan ready when there is a flooding inside their system. I think that we will talk a little bit, I think I will skip this. But when there is a flooding, we always see that there is a very high hazard or a risk of electrocution. We have seen a worker after the typhoon. He tried to pump the water out of the construction site such that work can continue, and then he got electrocution because the pump actually is submerged in water. So after that, what we think that could be done is that we should have engineering control as well as administrative control to reduce the risk of these kind of happenings. First, we can all the electrical products that we will be using should be waterproof to the international standard we call IP67, as well as I am bringing this along. This is what the council has been sponsoring the SMEs to use because actually it's a portable one. I think I can. This is a portable one, and when there is a small leakage of current, it's 10 milliampere, it would trip, such that the power will be cut, protecting the workers from this. This is portable, and of course this is waterproof. It's only around $20 US for one, such that before it rains, the companies would use that so that is exposed to flooding area, then our workers would be protected like this. And but apart from electrocution, we think that preparedness is very important. We try to think, can we prevent flooding or we reduce the risk of flooding? That is one thing. And the other thing is that after we have a flooding, when we are doing the remedial parts, can we have a more efficient water pump and reduce the electrocution? The electrocution, we talked about that, but can we reduce the event of having a flooding? The Hong Kong government is having this. This is a robot. That is the operator actually is somewhere outside. He doesn't need to be submerged in water with this desilting machine. We've got further information about this desilting machine at the exhibition hall downstairs. So please do come to the Hong Kong Island and come to our booth to have a look at this this information. We couldn't get the real thing, but we got a small model downstairs. Apart from that, we also have this water pump. This is very efficient water pump. Is also a robot that could be used. And the water pump pumps 600 cubic meters of water every hour. But to preparedness, and when we talk about the rescue workers, I got a story that I wish to tell you. A very telling story that we can prevent the rescue workers having to go to the very dangerous site when there is a landslide. What to do is that we have vigilant. Our workers have to be, or our frontline have to be remain vigilant. It's just 1 month ago, in a rural area in Guangdong, there was a tropical cyclone coming, and the grassroots leaders, the frontline workers, they just go around and did their routine inspection. They witnessed that, there's a muddy water and there's a graphite coming down the rivers. They said that, that is a dangerous happening. So what they actually did was that they did an immediate evacuation. But the villages is very small. The village was very small. It's only 57 villages. They evacuated all the villages from that 1 hour after the landslip come. So no casualties because of this. So what we gather from this story, that this real story, is that we have the knowledgeable inspector who know his own brief. They have to be vigilant, as well as the villagers have to cooperate. When you go to evacuate, you will see that, oh no, I don't think that it's dangerous. I can stay at my home. The education is really important. They are cooperate. Because of this, then the rescue workers don't need to go to the place to rescue because of this, the whole system. And in Guangdong, actually, we are also using IoT and other AI system to help us to get early alerts of any dangerous happenings like gas leakage, water leakage, flooding, and all that. With this, I would like to invite you again to our booth. We have many others equipment like heat stroke, emergency response, and all this. So with this, I will end my presentation, and thanks for your attention. Thank you.
Could I ask Bonnie and Yoko to maybe take a seat up near the front while they're doing that? I think contrasts very much the first session, but equally important. What I've seen from both speakers was the both graphs of the increased the number of flooding events in both Japan and in Hong Kong. And the other interesting thing I noticed from Bonnie was not alone, the severity of them is increasing. And once in a 500-year event, it's something that most of us shouldn't experience in our lifetime. But I think it's increasingly something we all face somewhere annually. So these 1 in 500-year events are no longer 1 in 500-year events in reality. What I did learn as well is that, how we have learned and progressed as we're getting more used to these things. Yoko, the first event, the flood, you were cooking rice and providing cardboard beds as a very basic form of occupational health. But by the earthquake, at least there was preparedness. There was QR codes available, so you could prepare for the health of the workers. You can't foresee everything, but it is valuable. And again, I saw the same thing in Hong Kong, where the first flooding event caused some investigations and preparedness, prevention of floods, and then thinking about how we can deal with this, including the use of robots, and so to prevent putting workers in harm's way. So thank you both for a very interesting session. I'm going to invite some questions. We have some time in this one. Do we have ILO students with us? We do? Do any of the ILO, we're very welcome, first of all, okay. Do any of the ILO students want to ask a question? Because this is, we're excellent. You're very welcome. And this is your future.
Martin, if no question.
No, please.
I would like to address the emergency response and the fact of wearing suits, so for chemical emergency response or nuclear emergency response, like unfortunately you had to experience. So wearing suits, of course, expose you to extreme temperature. Often these suits are plastic suits or things like that. So I'd like to know how Japan is prepared for this type of emergency where you have to wear suits, and how you can manage stress and all this involvement of these additional risk for the employers, workers.
Maybe I can add a little bit, because although we don't have a touch wood, we don't have the problem related to nuclear or something like that. But during the COVID-19, of course, our health workers will still have to wear the overalls to protect them from the virus. Mm-hmm. So what happened was that we remember, because actually I brought along actually a cooling vest. Ray, you can, you just show them here. No, you don't need to come up. We just show them here. We do have a vest. And I asked, can we, because during the summertime we still have the COVID-19, and I asked, can we give this to the poor workers who are having overalls, and they are doing, some of the time they have to just get a tent and do the testing for the residents. Mm-hmm. But my colleague said that no, because the air blown, you cannot do that, because actually then it may draw the virus into the system, and they can. So actually, we try to give them some cooling gel, around the neck, or stuff like that, to try to help them to reduce the water heat, and reduce the temperature, the body heat. This kind of a vest won't be working, but there would be, and I think that Dr. Professor did talk about the phase change, the PCM. Mm-hmm. That could also be done, or you play some, because of the phase change, it would help reduce, and if you put it around the neck, that could reduce the body temperature a bit. But of course, we have experts. Mm-hmm. Yes.
I mean, the general rule of thumb, if you want to affect thermal comfort, right, you can cool the skin, but none of this would reduce the core temperature. But there is still space for that. There's certain context where you don't have to reduce core temperature. You want to do comfort, and that is okay. So know the context. In that case, right, we actually found when the workers in that emergency response, they were not hot of concern of heat stroke, but they were thermally uncomfortable. We administered a risk-taking test. And the unfortunate news is when they were thermally uncomfortable, they took more risk. Not good for them, not good for the patients under their charge. The strength of that study is there was an intervention. We provided ice slurry, counterbalance there. So when they were cool with that ice slushy, they no longer took those risks. And also it's not just about heat injury, but thermal discomfort decision-making leading to accidents.
Yeah. Unfortunately, wearing mask and respirator, you're not allowed to lift it to drink water. So it increased risk as well because you cannot continue hydrating yourself.
Correct. So in that case, they ingested that before they went about that operation. If I may, because I saw one of the key questions that we should prepare the healthcare workers before the emergency. Because what we saw was, in fact, you probably know a lot of healthcare workers are in a very bad shape. Which means their thermal capacity is very limited. Any stressor, including heat, will perturbate their physiology. Yeah.
I see some of the ILO students have stood up, so please come forward.
Hello, thanks for having us, and thank you for your presentations. So one question that we thought of was what kind of strategies do you feel are best when encouraging high-risk populations to take emergency preparedness seriously? Obviously, there can be prior events that might, inspire and say, hey, this is a real problem. But for other populations where maybe it's not as common, or as the climate changes and places that maybe have not seen certain emergencies start to see those emergencies, how can you help people take those kinds of preparations seriously?
This is $1 million question. Actually, this question is asking, when Mom is also here, when we are asking the colleagues, workers, even for working at height, how we try to get them to do the preventive measures like wearing the harness seriously. It's really difficult. So for me, our experience is that what works well is that you got some near real life experience. We have VR to try them to experience themselves, or some real life very sad story, but you just tell them that, okay, this is real. We have seen, hopefully, there won't be any casualties, but we have seen some very dangerous happenings. You try to make it more vivid and make it more real life, then people would take heed of this. But it takes time, and it's real hard work. And if, the students, you are the next generation, if you have any brilliant ideas, I think that, everybody within this room would be more than happy to hear it.
Thank you. I don't know that I have any ideas on that right now. Maybe with some time and some preparation, we could come up with something. But thank you.
Thank you for your question. Lady.
So I had a question. You mentioned that preparedness is very important in emergency response. I was just wondering how you integrate that emergency medical care between work professionals and the healthcare system. Yeah. So how you're integrating, communication between people at the workplace responding to an emergency and communication with people in the health workforce, communicating between those two, and how you're helping them both, approach the emergency at hand.
You mean healthcare for workers or victims?
Healthcare for the victims, yeah.
Victims. In Japan, a lot of victims come to evacuation center, and then we ask Medical Doctors Association to establish a kind of temporal clinic in the evacuation center, and they try to give some kind of essential medication to the victims at the evacuation center. Is this a point?
Yeah, that makes sense.
Yeah.
Thank you.
I mean, to be fair, when these events occur, they're usually with out or with very little warning, and things can be quite chaotic. I suppose, in general, we need to try to prepare for these things as best we can. We need to try to forecast events. This is why, things like the Met Service predicting flooding events as much as we can do, it gives everyone that little bit more time to prepare. That includes the emergency workers, but it also includes the health response. It's all about anticipating and trying to implement what you can do. There still will be surprises. There still will be, in a disaster situation, everything can be chaotic. But I think it is trying to plan as best as we can do and try to anticipate as best as we can do. I think that's maybe would be my view. Thank you for the question.
Thank you. Dino Pizzillo from the University of Adelaide. In Australia, we've had a system where people who are disaster physicians get placed into agencies where there are different cultures. They understand how they might operate within that culture, and similarly vice versa. The workforce type people engaged in the health system, so they understand the culture, because there are different cultures, and I can understand how there might be a problem with operability.
Okay, thank you for that comment. Any other questions? We're about a minute or two left. If there's anyone else brave enough. Sir.
Yeah, thank you. My name is Ho Seong Hin. I'm the current president of the International Association of Labour Inspection. I'd like to ask Dr. Yoko Tsurugi something very specific, because I noted that she has been appointed as the occupational health physician in the office, and in preparing their people to respond to disaster and emergency response. I'd just like to know, is it a legal requirement that all such public office need to appoint such an occupational physician? And if it is it a full-time role? And thirdly, what will be the normal job that you do as an appointed occupational physician in a public office? Thank you.
Regardless of a public office or a private office, if the office, the company or government has the workers more than 1,000, they should appoint an occupational physician, at least one. This is legally, regulated. Okay. Full time.
What is your role as a
Full time. They have a lot of roles. Regular health checkups or counseling. The workers who are overworked. And they need to go to the workplace to check the environment of the workers at least once a month, or they can give some advices to improve the workplace environment to the director of the company or something like that.
Okay, we're actually on time, which surprises me more than anyone. Thank you for all your engagement. We have a short break now until 12:05, but if I can have you all back on time, we will start at 12:05 sharp. So please be back here. Thank you very much.
Okay, it's 12:05. So I hope everybody can sit down. We would like to start again with this session. And well, this third session is on ESG. But before we start the introduction, I would like you to ask can you do the other, her presentation with the QR code? I would like you to scan this slide and the QR code and answer the questions. And while you are doing that, I can introduce my speakers. And my speakers are, and the first question is, what's your current role? And Andrea, will the second question also pop up, or do you do that later? Oh, okay. So this question would be nice to know what your role is in your daily work. So, having said that, I would like to introduce Candice Dix and Jamie Lim. They will guide us to a topic related to climate change, but it's more an umbrella topic, I think, ESG. We explore with them how we can drive the focus on ESG priorities beyond climate change. Candice Dix is ESG Assurance Manager at Rio Tinto, and she will do this from the industry perspective. And then we've got Jamie Lim, who will do it from the governmental perspective, and she's Director Major Hazards. She's the Director of the Major Hazards Department and OSH Specialist of the Ministry in Singapore. So, ladies.
Good morning, everyone. It's afternoon. I'm still in the Singapore time. Good afternoon, everyone. Could you all scan so that we know who is the profile of what function or what role you play? We hope to have a more interactive session. We will use Mentimeter. Hope you can come on board with us because we want to introduce and hopefully install some concrete actions with regards to ESG that you can take home and build into your corporation, your role, or whatever, and we can have a more sustainable future for everyone. So if I could trouble everyone to do that, okay. Then once we are done, I think we have about 18 responses. If anyone wants to put in now, now's the time. Okay, so we've got, most of us are practitioners here. We've got 9 of us, and then quite a few regulators. So some of my colleagues are here as well. So, and also management. Management is important because they are the decision makers. They allocate resources. So you have an important role to play. So all of us together, hopefully in our various roles, we can contribute and then have better outcomes. Okay, one more, putting in the response, 19 out of 20. So when that comes in, we'll move on to the next slide. Okay, so most of us are practitioners, so we are well amongst peers and with upholding the same goals within the room. So okay, let's move on. So we have another question for you. Because this session, well, the broad one is on climate change and the future of work, but we are focusing on ESG. So what do you think of when you hear ESG? Just put in your thoughts. What comes to mind? What have you heard about it? What are the concepts you have experienced? Or you are actually into ESG? So 7 out of 20, 8 out of 20, we're waiting a few more responses. There's an interesting one, E bigger than S. And the interconnected topics, yes, we are all related. We affect and impact each other. Different areas can overlap as well. And sustainability is a key word that comes out at us. How do we continue what we've been doing today, tomorrow, and for years to come? Stakeholder management changes. Yeah, there's a lot of uncertainty now. And it's heartening to hear it's excellent, it's great. Okay, a couple more responses. Still good. So thank you for your responses. So we'll now share our side of what we think ESG is, or what I think is ESG is, because I'm a regulator in my day job. And when I was supposed to put up this presentation, actually I learned a lot from Candice. Candice has years of experience in terms of sustainability and ESG, and currently double hatting at Rio Tinto. So through our discussions, I actually learned a lot from her. So today, what we will do is first I'll give an introduction, then thereafter Candice will share her experience, implementation ideas for you to take away, and then we'll end off with another question and hopefully something that you can have an action plan to deal with and bring home with you as you leave the room. So I'm Jamie, and with me is Candice. So what is ESG? So earlier we had the takeaway of ESG, environmental, social, governance. Actually, these three words, they may be separate, but we are putting them together in a single framework, in a way to manage, and so that we can see how a business can impact environment and society. Also, we want to question what is the level of transparency in the processes, the reporting, and how ethical the resourcing, raw materials, the processes, the labor practices, as well as the waste streams, how are they managed? So we want to know that as part of ESG. And what does ESG mean for you and me? So if we can dive into the different layers of society, for individuals, that's for us, we can decide, we have a power, some agency to demand where we work, how we live, how we play, what are the goods and products and services that we procure. Then as the individuals working for a business, a corporation, we also have to see how we can contribute towards the corporation's outcomes, work processes, so that there is long-term success, there is good investments, good reputation for sustainable and ethical behavior. And in the ideal state, when individuals, corporations have the idea of ESG and actually implement it, we will have a society that everybody works towards in a sustainable manner, and it contributes to a better future for everyone. So that's the overall framework we have as an introduction for ESG. So over to you, Candice.
Thanks, Jamie. Before starting, I'd like to share a moment from last week. So I was in Tokyo Tower with my family, and my 4-year-old twin daughters are looking over the city, and they're pointing out the playgrounds, the trees, and the temples. What struck me was how they spoke, not about a city, not about a country, but about our world. Through their eyes, the world is whole, beautiful, and unchanging. They expect it to stay just as it is, safe, vibrant, and full of wonder. In that moment, I felt a deep sense of responsibility. A responsibility to do what I can do so that their children and their children's children can experience the same beauty, the same resources, and the same opportunities that we have today. That's why this conversation matters. So today we're operating in a world where expectations are evolving rapidly. Stakeholders and value chains are no longer just asking for results, they're demanding transparency, accountability, and environmental responsibility. The urgency of the climate crisis is pushing all of us, governments, businesses, and individuals, to adopt more sustainable practices. At the same time, there's a growing pressure for transparency and traceability. Investors and stakeholders are also prioritising ESG criteria like human rights and ethical sourcing, and expect consistent and credible reporting. Regulatory expectations are also rising. Governments are setting higher compliance standards across industries. And from a consumer perspective, we're becoming more conscious. We want responsibly sourced materials in the products we buy, like phones, laptops, and cars, which puts pressure on the entire supply chain. Meeting expectations today means not just keeping up, but leading with purpose, integrity, and bold action. As Jamie highlighted, and I think what came out of the Mentimeter, is that ESG is how we measure and communicate our sustainability performance. It's used by investors, by customers, and stakeholders to evaluate how we manage these three streams. So I'm just going to take us through them briefly. Environmental is about what impact do we have on the environment and how do we manage it. So this includes things like climate change, water use, biodiversity, and responsible consumption. And I saw someone said E before S, and environmental is where climate change sits. And I just thought we'd point that out, that this is about climate change, but really putting these topics into these streams is really challenging because they're so interconnected. And an example to really highlight that is that during COVID-19 and even today, we use face masks for public health, but the surge in the production of face masks has led to environmental challenges. If even just 1% of masks are improperly disposed of, that's around 10 million masks a month, creating 30 to 40 tonnes of environmental waste, plastic waste, into the environment. To address this, we need better waste management, biodegradable and reusable materials, and stronger policies. Social is about how we support people, communities, and workers. So this is traditionally where health and safety sits. This includes things like diversity and equity, Indigenous relationships, labour rights, and health and safety. An example here is around the increase in the silicosis cases we've seen in Australia and other countries, with stone benchtop manufacturing, usually small and medium-sized enterprises as well. That highlights the need for stronger protections for workers, but is not just a worker issue. It impacts those individuals, those families, and those communities as well. And last but not least, governance. This focuses on how do we ensure ethical, transparent, and accountable practices. So this includes internal systems and processes. We're going to talk a bit about that today. Decision-making, legal compliance, and stakeholder trust. And as I think everyone in this room, a lot of people did point this out in the Menti, these aspects are interconnected. To have a healthy workforce, we need a healthy community. Workers are part of the communities. And for healthy communities, we need healthy environments. Workers depend on the natural resources where they reside. So it's all very interconnected. So as mentioned, consumers expect the materials in their phones, cars, and laptops to be responsibly sourced. But with so many different standards, it's hard to build trust. So I wanted to share the Consolidated Mining Standard Initiative, which is currently under development, which is really aiming to address this issue in the mining sector. Global standards mean better alignment. So the Consolidated Standard aims to clearly define what responsible mining looks like across all ESG performance areas. It incorporates a site-based audit. So this is every 3 years is what the expectation will be. So it's not by company, it's actually at the site level and on the ground with an interdisciplinary audit team. I've had the privilege of contributing to this initiative through the Industry Advisory Group, and I'm excited to see it evolving and improving through the public consultation process. So I'm sharing it today. There's going to be a second consultation, so I encourage you to have a look at it and get involved in that consultation as well and influence the direction of the standard. We wanted to share this because it shows that issues are managed by topic, not by discipline. So for example, fatigue management would sit actually under the rights of workers. So it's a labour rights, it's a health and it's a safety issue. Solving it requires inputs from health safety, OSH practitioners, HR on roster design. So it's not just one area that's influencing this. Another example is access to clean air and water, which is a human right. It's also a worker health issue and a community issue. So when we look at this, even though it's under those 4 pillars, again, there's lots of connection points that we can make. And ESG areas are interconnected. So solving one problem, like the face mask to prevent COVID transmission, shouldn't create another problem like the environmental waste. And I think this is really important for us to consider in our practice. When we're recommending controls, wherever they sit on the hierarchy, what are the other potential impacts or risks that they introduce as well? Another point to point out is that safety, health and wellbeing overlap with nearly every ESG performance area here. However, health and safety requirements are often very limited in ESG standards compared to environmental and social topics. So I saw that also pointed out. So really this is about us trying to influence standard development. It's extremely important that we have our voices heard and we're seen as part of ESG and as part of sustainability. As we transition to a low carbon future, a circular economy and integrate AI into our way of living, the risks for workers will change rapidly, and we're seeing that now. OSH practitioners need to be at the forefront to protect workers and communities. And again, we saw this in the first mentee. We all come from different backgrounds, different specialisations and different roles. But this is relevant to everyone, and unless we come together, we can't solve these issues. So we encourage you to identify and think about these different performance areas and how they connect to your work and who you need to engage and collaborate with. We're going to come back to that as an exercise at the end of the session. So we'll circle back, hopefully. You've picked up on a few of those performance areas. But to turn these ESG goals into action, companies need systems and processes. So we saw that under governance. At Rio Tinto, our sustainability framework brings together our ESG targets, our standards, and our commitments. It helps us embed sustainability into planning, decision-making, and performance tracking. It's built on 2 pillars and 5 themes that reflect what matters most to our stakeholders and to our business. We're environmentally committed, so you can see that on the green side, safeguarding nature and prioritising the low carbon transition. We're also socially connected, so that's the blue side, but you can see them coming together and connecting in the middle. We're caring for our people and building strong, respectful relationships with communities and Indigenous peoples. And at the centre are 4 enablers, and I think this is something that we really wanted to point out as enablers that everyone can think about. They are respecting rights, transparency, innovation and partnerships. So this framework aligns our teams because it's not just one team, it's not the health and safety team, it's every single team in every organisation that needs to champion sustainability in every decision and investment that they make. So this helps support decision making at all levels and ensures accountability. And I'm not going to read through this, but this is really the metric. So how do we translate that into actionable, tangible outcomes? So ESG targets and metrics align with our strategic objectives and our sustainability framework. So it's all interconnected. You can see the global standard is something that we are adopting. That then feeds how do we set that within our business context. So that's the framework. And then the metrics are there to measure how we're progressing with strategic objectives and shaping our strategies and guiding investment decisions. We regularly review and update our targets to reflect evolving stakeholder and societal expectations. An example this year was that we've got new targets for decarbonisation and nature. And you can see a lot of the relevant metrics under the people column at the end there relate to health and safety. But I think really thinking about some of these others and what part we have to play in them as well. So I pass back to Jamie on the regulator perspective.
Thank you, Candice. So from her sharing and while we were discussing, I had some key takeaways. So the first key takeaway I had was, if a company is good and upholds ESG, that company tends to have better, safe and healthy practices for its workers. It will tend to have a better protection for workers. So from a regulator's point of view, we would prefer such enlightened companies. They will be able to make sure that the work processes are safe. The services that they procure, there is also responsibly sourced, ethical, transparent. Whoever the company that they buy from also has similar aspirations and visions. So if that is the case, then in terms of being a regulator, we would prefer companies to take ownership and be enlightened and take control of their outcomes and have good protections and measures for workers, and therefore in turn protecting the environment. So there may be, you may have questions about how does it all relate to ESG and OSH. So this is my takeaway after I've talked to Candice. So that's one key takeaway. The other key takeaway was this session is on climate change. So how does climate change impact all of us? So it's at the end where we have been taking resources from the environment, but we did not take care of it or put back or restore it as much as we did. And therefore we are experiencing the effects on us, on the work that we do. So if we were able to be responsible and attenuate the impact, the damage we have done to the environment, then we can prolong and sustain and keep at it and still, you know, in a way selfishly or in a way be able to balance correctly and still have economic outcomes and outputs for everyone so that society can benefit as a whole. So these are my key takeaways after I learned from Candice, and I hope she shared it and you have sufficiently picked her brains about ESG. So now just coming back deeper into climate change and workers. So as a regulator, we will want workers to be protected, especially the vulnerable ones. We will want the labour force participation to continue in spite of the uncertainty in climate. The heat waves, floodings, and all the emergency responses, the downtime that we experience, we want to minimize it as much as possible and still have that economic output. We can protect workers, especially outdoor workers, when they do heavy manual work, and especially those in construction, roadworks. But we should also take care of those in indoors, where the ventilation is not well designed for higher temperatures, as well as if workers are working close to like ovens, heat-producing equipment, boilers. Then taking a step back, what about the equipment? They have been designed for a certain temperature, but when exposed to low-grade heat for a long period of time, what is actually the damage mechanism on them? We may not know, or the part that fails may not be so apparent, the one that is the weakest link. Then in terms of our infrastructure, the metallic parts for the civil structures, the cement, the buildings, the roads, how are they impacted with all this prolonged heat exposure on the infrastructure? Have we thought about it? So from the earlier sessions, we learned that we should foresee, anticipate, prevent, and then have alert warnings. So we should do that during peacetime. Extending from heat, we also have to look at other adverse weather conditions. It's more erratic, so we should be expecting that and anticipating. We learned about firefighters, emergency response workers, how do we protect them better? Because in a crisis, everybody is keen to help each other out. Then with this mindset, we will just plunge in and forget about our own safety. So how can we help them to continue to be safe so that they can save and rescue and help others? Then floods can inundate electrical equipment, as well as high winds can affect tall structures, tower cranes, scaffolding, even existing buildings. Have we thought about them? Yeah. So to combat climate change, we can start with ESG. We should start with ourselves. First, we have the agency, we have the right to demand services and goods that we buy that uphold ESG, so that we start with ourselves, the place we work in, and therefore influencing the society. Hopefully we will have an outcome when we all, as a group, as a species, work together. We can strive towards a socially responsible workplace with a workforce, as well as the entire society continues to be economically competitive. We should demand for carbon neutrality, net zero emissions, as well as the use of cleaner energy. With the rise of AI, the energy consumption is going to be heavier, so we should also take care of that. So summarizing some key takeaways from our sharing. Safety, health, and well-being is actually interconnected. So like what I shared earlier, what Candice shared earlier, we may have certain views of what it is, but there are other impacts that we have to take a longer-term view and to look at other stakeholders that we partner with. Therefore, an interdisciplinary approach is a must. We cannot work in silos. We must partner and work in teams. And actually, many of the UN Sustainable Development Goals and ESG concepts implementation is relevant to OSH. So we should, as practitioners, make that linkage and actually act on it. So what does this mean for all of us? So there's a lot of information. What can we do? So the first recommendation that we want to give is start with a partner mapping exercise. So if you already have established work processes, SOPs, then see where you can work with your partners, where are your interconnected areas. So start with that. Because otherwise, in this world of uncertainty, a lot of climate change, AI, things that are coming up, that is maybe that's the easiest way to start. So that's our recommendation. And incorporate all these metrics. I think Candice showed them in a slide that's from Rio Tinto, and we can adapt from there. So these are some examples that we can work off, and from there develop programs, strategies, implementation plans. And after that, prepare for increased transparency, because if I were to procure a service or a product, I would want to know where they got their raw materials from, how they're taking care of their workers, how they're managing their waste streams. So that reporting has to come through and it has to be verified, audited, etc. So the assurance has to be there before I accept the reporting data. So with that, if we really uphold, we also influence stakeholders, partners, then everybody will be at a higher bar in terms of ESG, and we really walk the talk. So today, over to Candice.
So we wanted to leave with a call to action. How can we promote sustainability in our field? So for example, think about greenhouse gas emissions, disposable versus reusable personal protective equipment. These are some of the practical solutions we've got to be thinking up when we're weighing up our recommendations. How can we protect biodiversity and promote circular economy practices? So things like, can materials be reused, repurposed, or recycled? And what's the lifespan of the materials that we're recommending? Starting to think about the greenhouse gas footprint that we might be recommending and looking at alternative options from that perspective as well. And supply chain due diligence. How can we support our vendors and suppliers to improve their ESG practices? So we're actually all in a very unique position where we can influence different other organisations that are linked to our organisation. It's not just doing something internally, it's also what are my external partners and who can I link in with to influence and educate them as well. And I think very importantly, what can we each do personally? So at work and in our communities to live more sustainably. Energy is the largest carbon emitter, followed by transport, agriculture, and industry. Every action that we take as consumers, big or small, can make a difference. And we want to come back to this consolidated standard and really highlight that I think, the external landscape is now moving rapidly to consolidate standards so that they become more meaningful for end consumers. So the intent is that this is a, raw materials, it's a mining standard at this stage, and it will be an audit at the mine site level. But into the future, there's going to be value chain stakeholders, external stakeholders. It's a multidisciplinary governance model that will oversee this standard. So it's working collaboratively with all of the communities and stakeholders downstream that are impacted as well. And I think in the future, we're seeing some initiatives like the Global Battery Alliance, the Battery Passport, for instance, where they're looking at how do we publish information and the footprint of that product as it moves through a supply chain. And if you think about your phone and you think about all the raw materials that went into your mobile phone, and then the thousands of different manufacturers that were involved in that. So it would have been mined initially. There might have been smelting and refining processes. Then it would have gone to, component manufacturers, and then eventually to the end manufacturer, the OEM, like the Apples or the Samsungs. So it's passed through many hands. And as consumers, we can influence not only the company that we're purchasing from, but through that purchase, all of the companies within that whole value chain. So we wanted to do this exercise. We're going to bring back the Mentimeter. But what we want to bring up first before we do that, I'm hoping you're all still connected to that. If not, it's on the website and the code is there for you to access it. But we wanted to start with the actions together in this room. I think it's easy to talk a bit about it, but what do we actually mean? And let's get started today. So we're asking each of you to identify one performance area from these 24 that you would like to contribute to more in your workplace. So, easily, I think a lot of OSH practitioners were in that first Mentimeter. Traditionally we would sit within safe, healthy and respectful workplaces. We actually have a lot of contributions to make in diversity, equity and inclusion and accessibility to workplaces. But rights of workers, as I highlighted, that's where roster design sits. There's human rights components here under ethical business practices. Often, new projects and closure is where we see a lot of risks as well within the mining sector particularly. But responsible supply chains, that's about influencing, downstream or upstream, our customers or our suppliers or vendors. So identify one of these and then think about the key partners or colleagues and the disciplines that you would need to engage and collaborate with for that particular performance area. And we want you to have a discussion with the person or the people around you. You might not be sitting next to someone directly, but maybe just share which of those you've selected and who you're going to engage with. And that's going to hopefully hold us to account. And then we'll have a quick look at the Menti side, which is more of a commitment actually, isn't it? Yes. So don't touch the Menti yet. First, think about which of these you're going to choose first to start with, and who you need to engage with, and have a really quick discussion with those around you if you have people sitting next to you.
Don't be nervous. Go close to someone near you and just have a discussion, if you can.
So if you haven't had the discussion or you're thinking about it individually, what we've got is the Mentimeter there for you to have a think about what are you going to commit to? What are you going to do? What's your key takeaway for the session? If you could put some thoughts around that, I think it allows about 200 characters, isn't that? Yep.
It's probably in your browser.
Does anyone want to share their thoughts that they've discussed or had to think about? Might be around climate action. That sits under environmental stewardship, but we know from today's session, highly relevant for OSH. Okay, so we might bring up the Mentimeter then. No one wants to jump up and brave it, and we'll have a look at some of the thoughts going in there. So there's a lot more to do. Completely agree with that. Ethical business practice, that's a good takeaway, and I think that connection back to governance. Everything in ESG is interconnected: climate, worker health, sustainability, and ethical responsibility. Social performance, I actually love this one, engaging with local communities, unrepresented sectors. I think we've got a lot of work to do in that. We've got the expertise that often communities and public health needs. If we're working in remote and regional areas, we need to get outside of the workforce gates and start to think about our impacts beyond that as well. So can we educate not only the workers about, noise exposure, about heat? Can we actually get out there? Can we start to engage with schools? Education platforms, other areas. Need to have a holistic approach to tackle challenges in ESG, and the three aspects are interlinked. I think that's a really good comment. My key learning moving from occupational hygiene into ESG is that you don't know what you don't know, and if we keep working in our area, we're not going to learn about the other impacts that we can have. So really branch out, be bold, and don't be afraid to step out of your comfort zone. Third-party verification is essential, yes, so assurance definitely has a part to play, but it's also not the silver bullet. So no audit is going to give you the absolute, yep. We're targeting the ILO students today.
Hello, thank you. This has been a great presentation, by the way. I've really enjoyed it, and a lot of things that I haven't considered before, especially in the consideration that some of our interventions might have collateral damage for safety and health. At our university, we've got this whole center dedicated to international work, and it talks about being in love with the problem and not the solution. Sometimes we get really attached to a solution, and then we forget that there are more considerations that we need to think about when looking at the entire problem. I was thinking just on the point of cultural heritage that you had as a point up there. I'm from Texas, and for those of you who know Texas, Texans have a lot of pride in their state. And because of that, they launched this campaign for recycling that was "Don't mess with Texas." And that was the slogan. And it was this idea that we love our land so much that we weren't gonna litter or leave out trash. And it worked really well because it was with the values that Texans already had in them. And I wonder, we've all been to different places, my group and I, we've traveled outside of the country and seen that people have a lot of different values. For you, what would you say is the best way to gauge those cultural values and find that cultural heritage to best cater to that?
Culture differs from race to race, location to location, but I think what connects us all are human stories. Anything that is vivid, emotional, that will tug at the heartstrings, that's the one that people will remember. So if we want to transcend cultural differences, I think we can talk about what is emotional, what is probably touching. Yeah, that's the answer for me.
And I think standards are really helpful to have a look at some of the definitions and how they tie back. In terms of cultural heritage, it's often linked back to traditional owners or Indigenous peoples and their connection to land, and to, specific areas that are really culturally significant and important. And it's about not only protecting the environment, but it's also very much about protecting those cultural heritage areas, which are really critical. But I think as well, what you're referring to is land connectedness. Any impacts to an area impacts communities. So I think there's a really strong tie back from a health perspective as well, is, we're not only protecting our resources from a health standpoint, we're not only looking at drinking water, for drinking water quality or, protecting that water body for the future generations, we're also thinking about the cultural significance water has in some areas as well. So all of these things kind of come together, and I think really great call out for cultural heritage.
Thank you.
Thank you. Question.
When I saw the list of possible answers, I like the one workers' rights. As a regulator, we have to see that at the end of the day, it's the workers that are often a victim of the climate changes. And you perfectly said that it's not only those working outside, but also inside. And you also mentioned that we had to do the exercise of mapping other stakeholders that could work together with us. Because I think as labor inspectors, regulators, we are often work in silos. But we should reach out to others, companies, unions, and other institutions to find solutions. But I think we have to wake up. The climate change is here. Whether we like it or not, we have to accept it, and we have to think about the workers' rights in this time. Thank you.
I think that's such a critical point. And, those who've contributed the least to climate change are those who have been impacted the most significantly. And I think this really is an important point, because to build a fair and sustainable future, we need to champion a just transition. So you might have seen the term just transition out there, and that's really what it's referring to. It's about one that leaves no one behind. So that's workers, but it's also thinking about the other countries that are less developed, that are really feeling the effects most significantly, and what are we going to do, how are we going to change our systems to support them.
Candice, just to follow up from your comments and also what Paul previously mentioned, the draft Rio Tinto framework is quite extensive. You refer to human rights and also especially engaging with local communities. And one of the big challenges we have is, like we heard about informal workers. So we have the regulators, the trade unions, and others looking after the workers. But informal workers and people in the broader communities who are often very much affected by mining and other activities. How do you, genuinely engage with them and listen to their real concerns?
Absolutely. I think just to clarify, so the first slide, which was the consolidated standard, that is not a Rio Tinto initiative. It's a global initiative and it's multi-stakeholder. We're contributing from an industry perspective, but I think it also kind of forms part of that answer. It's multi-stakeholder. So we're getting inputs from a range of different stakeholders, including communities, Indigenous peoples from different parts of the world, from value stream stakeholders, investors, regulators, academics. There's a lot of people involved in the development of that standard, and I think that's one way. From a company perspective, we've got a lot of engagement programs like Local Voices, where we engage with our communities, and that's often really championed by our social investment teams, our social performance teams. So I think, one takeaway for me now, knowing that, I wasn't too aware of that when I was working in occupational health and hygiene. Now knowing that if I was to go back into that space, I would partner really strongly with those teams and look at opportunities where they have forums engaging our community stakeholders face-to-face. There's a lot of different forums that we have. We have surveys, we have face-to-face engagements, and even through the audit process. So the consolidated standard invites community groups or any interested impacted stakeholders to participate in the audit independently and give their feedback, and then that is disclosed. And so it's a way of holding companies accountable and improving their sustainability performance over time. So, yeah, I think connecting in with those experts, if you've got them, if you've got access to them, otherwise having a look at standards like this and looking at the social criteria is really helpful.
Candice and Jamie, thank you very much for the presentation. I'm Baka from Singapore. I just want to seek some of your opinion with the recent things that are happening globally on the energy transition, on the climate change. Do you think that the world now globally, with regard to the climate change, the effort has been slowed down? Or do you think that based on your views, your interaction with some of your counterparts that you have, I just want to seek some opinion. Do you feel that the effort now is a bit more slow? Because I saw, for the last 3 months, some of the fund, the green investment fund and so on, in terms of the movement with regard to the climate change, have significantly dropped or even muted for the last 3 months. I just want to seek some opinion. Thank you.
I think there has been quite a large impact for some countries that have pulled out of this green initiative. But I think there is still some hope because, like for example, I went to China last month. They are still big on hydrogen there. There's a lot of effort pushing. So while certain countries with power may seem to have pulled out, but I think there are also other countries, and in our region, back in Singapore, in ASEAN, there's also some push there because everybody has committed to a 2050, for Singapore, 2050 goal of net zero, and maybe I think China is 2060. So for us in Singapore, we project first it will peak. So emissions will go up. So that is on track until 2030. Then after that, it should come down. So we are now reaching there. So at the moment, it seems to be going up. Candice and I were talking about it. So that should go up first before it comes down. So I guess we are at this, if I may say, it's an inflection point, maybe. Yeah, so we have to wait and see. There are still other countries that are having some power, and also the infrastructure already is built around cleaner energy. It's hard to pull it out overnight. So it will still continue. Businesses, some of them will still continue, but it's just how long can they sustain in this journey? Yeah.
Yeah, I think it's a really good question. And I think we're seeing a lot of rapidly evolving changes around the world at the moment. I'm really optimistic. From a Rio Tinto perspective, we're really committed to, a low carbon energy transition. So if you look at our key pillars, ESG is absolutely at the forefront. There's our sustainability framework, and we're very committed to that. And there's new technology. I think one of the challenges around this is that it relies on technology development. So when we set metrics and targets, we're actually looking at what technologies are available to us now, but also thinking about what technologies are under development as well and making sure that they're developed. So there's a lot of partnerships that are happening, not just across industry, but across multiple industries to try and make this happen. I think what's critical right now, because there's a lot of economic aspects to this as well, is that as consumers, we've got to be really driving this. We've got to see this as important because that's what's really going to put pressure across the whole value chain. Companies that I see are still really serious about this. I think it's a really important issue for the mining sector. Climate change is absolutely the critical issue, but we can't leave behind those other aspects. We can't just look at it in isolation. We've got to look at biodiversity conservation because that's very related to climate change as well. So I think education, and I think not underestimating our power as consumers, and not underestimating our power within our organisations to really drive the focus on this issue as well. But certainly our company is very committed to it, but I do see your point around changes. An example would be the omnibus package that's happened in the EU, where there's a simplification on some of the reporting standard requirements that they were putting out. And it was initially very quick transition, very huge drive for all companies. And CBAM is another example of that. But they're now kind of modifying, the criteria for the initial round of implementation of that. So yes, I think in some cases there's a bit of a slowdown, but I'm very hopeful that that's, not going to be the long-term outlook.
Thank you so much. Congratulations for your presentation. I think nowadays we are very committed and very aware of the climate change because according to ILO numbers, more than 2 billion workers are exposed. That means more than 20 million occupation non-fatal injury and more than 2 million disability-adjusted life years and more than 18,000 work-related deaths. I'm labor inspector in Spain, where today the temperatures are very high and where 2 workers have died because of the temperature. So in our country and also in IALI, we have been very commitment, writing reports and through webinars. And in Spain, there has been a new regulation in force in 2023. And that has been said that if it's alarm, red and orange, and it's not safe to work because your temperature will rise more than 40 degrees. So there's a high possibility to suffer a heart stroke. You might stop, you might adapt your working hours, or you can start earlier, or you can even leave your workplace without any punish. You will get paid and you will have your own salary. So therefore, there's a guide developed by the labor inspector in Spain. And we also have been doing so many visits, not only outside in the agriculture, construction side, but also indoors, as you mentioned it, because there are so many regulations, for instance, in India or in Singapore or even in Spain, where the temperature inside must be from 17 till 27 if you work in an office, but if you work as a waiter or if you have to move, it's 14 till 25. So we have to take care that climate change can be a great author for our health and for our well-being. So we must focus and help not only in the regulation part, but also working close with the other stakeholders, workers, unions, and of course, training is a very important issue because sometimes when we go to the field, workers, they do not know what is the legislation, and mostly, as Magrinda told, they are suffering because they are vulnerable when they are foreign employees. So labor inspector has to be there to change these challenges. Thank you so much.
Yeah, I think that was a great comment, and I think it connects back, what we were trying to make those connections there. It's about safety, health and well-being. It's also about inclusion. It's also about labour rights and work, roster design, and it's also about climate change. So it sits within various areas and lots of different stakeholders. So really great examples.
And I think Singapore and what you have shared with Spain, right, we have very similar approaches. So we can look at partnerships, how we can share good practices and see if there are any learnings that we can harness between each other's jurisdiction and guidelines. Yeah, thank you. Thank you for sharing.
Sorry?
Yeah, so if it's okay, we will wrap up this session. Yeah. So before I wrap up this session, I would like to give a special thanks to Andrea. Andrea Holloway, she has been instrumental in our Mentimeter. So thanks very much. Yeah. So yesterday, Candice, Andrea, and the moderator, Andrea, we were at her apartment trying to figure this session out. Yeah. So we hope that you have benefited from Candice's sharing about ESG and you can bring home with you something that you can take a concrete action today as you walk out this room. So when we have that concrete action in hand, we have to think about what is the future that we want for ourselves for the rest of our lives. How do we want to sustain the way we have been doing and contributing to society? And also for our next generation, what are we leaving behind for them? And this is a special mention to the students here also. We want to leave something behind, some legacy that you can be proud of. And what is the future that we want for generations to come? As a species, we have the capability, the communications, and the willpower to work together as a group. So how can we use that power and do good? Yeah. So with that, thank you for contributing to our session. Thank you, Candice. Thank you to the moderators and Andrea.
Thank you both. I think it's been a fabulous morning. We started off with heat stress, then went through workers who were involved in flooding and other instances that are being brought on by climate change, and finished with an ESG session, which was, I think, illuminating. I'm a dinosaur. I was brought up and educated, just workplace hazards with fairly narrow focus. What I think today has done for me, and I hope for you, has broadened the view so that we can see, that everything around us can actually impact on our workers, and we depend on our workers. We need to care for our workers. And I think if I want one message from going up today, is climate change is real. It's a real issue for worker health, and we must do what we can. And thank you to Andrea as well for co-hosting.
My pleasure.
Thank you all.